You cannot breathe, not because your lungs have failed, they still work, but because the air around you has been replaced with something heavier. Pitch. Animal fat rendered down to liquid, cooling now against your skin in a shell that will not crack when you move. You are standing. Your arms are bound to a wooden post. The smell is overwhelming. Sulfur, rendered tallow, pine resin. You have been prepared. Around you, others stand in the same position, silent, breathing through their mouths because breathing through the nose brings the scent of what you have become. Garden ornaments, lighting fixtures. The metaphor your captors use is torches, but that word is too clean. You are fuel wrapped in human form, placed at intervals along a pathway through imperial gardens. The sun has not yet set, but preparations are complete. This is Rome. The year is 64 AD, though you would not mark time that way. For you, time is measured differently now, before the fire and after. The fire that consumed 2/3 of the city 40 days ago. The fire that Nero says you started. You did not start the fire, but someone needed to have started it, and you were the most convenient answer. Let me be clear about what happens next, because the historical record, though fragmented, is specific enough. What I am about to describe is not conjecture. It is documented by Tacitus, a Roman historian who despised Christians but despised dishonesty more. He wrote this down not to defend you, but to indict Nero. His account survived because it was useful, not to remember your suffering, but to demonstrate the emperor's excess. The pitch will ignite at dusk, not all at once. One by one, in sequence, to create the effect of a pathway lighting up as guests arrive. You will burn for approximately 8 to 12 minutes before your body fails. The pitch ensures a steady flame. The post ensures you remain upright. The Garden of Nero has been engineered for spectacle, and you are the latest innovation in atmospheric design. This is not madness. This is problem solving. The Great Fire of Rome began on July 18, 64 AD in the Merchant District near the Circus Maximus. It burned for 6 days. When it finally stopped, only 4 of Rome's 14 districts remained untouched. 500,000 people lost their homes. The imperial city, the center of an empire spanning 3 continents, had been reduced to ash and rubble in less than a week. Nero was not in Rome when the fire started. He was 30 miles away in Antium, his birthplace. When he returned, he opened his palace gardens to refugees. He organized relief efforts. He slashed the price of grain. These are facts often omitted from the popular narrative because they complicate the story we prefer, the story of Nero the arsonist, playing his lyre while Rome burned. But the rumor had already started. And rumors in Rome were infrastructure. They shaped reality more reliably than stone. The rumor was this: Nero had ordered the fire himself to clear land for his planned palace, the Domus Aurea, a sprawling complex that would cover 1/3 of the city centre. The rumor was plausible because Nero had publicly complained about Rome's narrow streets and architectural chaos. He had discussed urban redesign. He had, in casual conversation among architects, imagined a Rome rebuilt according to aesthetic principles, rather than the organic sprawl of centuries. The rumour was also false, but in the calculus of imperial survival, truth is a luxury, and perception is currency. Nero needed a scapegoat. Not just any scapegoat, he needed a group that was already suspect, already despised, already outside the protective circle of Roman civic religion. He needed people whose elimination would feel like justice rather than persecution. He chose Christians. You must understand what Christians meant to Rome in 64 AD. Not what they mean now, not a world religion with institutional power and centuries of theological architecture. In 64 AD, Christianity was a cult. A Jewish cult, though Jews themselves rejected it. Christians refused to honor the emperor as divine. They refused to make sacrifices to the city's protective gods. They spoke of a coming kingdom that would replace Rome. They called themselves brothers and sisters, but were bound by no recognizable kinship structure. They met in secret. They spoke of eating flesh and drinking blood. To Roman authorities, Christians were not a persecuted minority, they were a security risk. Tacitus writes, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Exquisite. Note the word, not brutal, not excessive, exquisite. The language of refinement, the language of art. Nero did not think of himself as a tyrant. He thought of himself as an artist trapped in the body of an emperor. His greatest frustration was not political opposition, it was aesthetic failure. He wanted to be remembered as the emperor who brought beauty to Rome, who elevated culture above mere governance, who proved that power could be wielded with elegance. The games he organized in his gardens were not punishments, they were performances. You must reframe what you think you know about Nero. The historical caricature, the mad emperor fiddling while Rome burned, is a distortion that obscures something more disturbing. Nero was not insane, he was methodical, he was strategic, he understood spectacle as a form of statecraft, and he recognized that violence, when properly staged, could function as both entertainment and political messaging. The torches were his concept, not the idea of burning Christians that was common enough in Roman jurisprudence for enemies of the state, but the specific method, coating them in pitch, mounting them on posts, arranging them as garden lighting for an evening party, that required imagination. It required aestheticization of suffering. The Roman historian Suetonius, writing decades later, describes the scene. Punishment was inflicted on the Christians, a class of men given to a new and mischievous superstition. Mockeries of every sort were added to their deaths. Covered with the skins of beasts, they were torn by dogs and perished, or were nailed to crosses, or were doomed to the flames and burnt to serve as a nightly illumination when daylight had expired. Tacitus adds a detail that Suetonius omits. Nero opened his own gardens for these spectacles. He mingled with the crowd dressed as a charioteer. He wanted to be seen not as a distant judge, but as a fellow spectator enjoying the show. This is important. The cruelty was not hidden. It was not carried out in dungeons or distant provinces. It was made public, made beautiful, made part of the social calendar. The message was clear. Defiance of Rome will be transformed into art, and you will applaud. Let us return to the garden, to you standing in pitch, waiting for ignition. How did you arrive here? The process was administrative. First, there were arrests. Informants were incentivized, clemency for testimony. Some Christians named others under torture. Some named others to spare themselves. The distinction does not matter. The system functioned as designed. You were categorized, not by what you had done, but by what you believed. Belief was evidence. Association was guilt. There was no trial in the sense that we would recognize. No presentation of specific criminal acts, no defense testimony, no burden of proof. The charge was Christianity itself, and Christianity was admission of hostility to Rome. You were stripped. This was not for efficiency. It was for humiliation. Nakedness in Roman culture was a form of social death. To be displayed without clothing was to be removed from personhood, to be reduced to flesh. Then came the coating. Pitch was applied while still warm enough to spread, but cool enough not to kill on contact. The process took time. You had to remain still or the coating would be uneven. An uneven coating meant uneven burning. The goal was a steady, sustained flame, not a brief flash that would waste the fuel of your body too quickly. Think about what that means. Someone calculated optimal thickness. Someone tested methods. Someone refined the technique based on prior results. This was not improvisation. This was engineering. You were mounted on a post. The post was tall enough to elevate you slightly above eye level, so the flame would be visible from a distance, but not so high that the heat would dissipate too quickly. The posts were spaced at intervals designed to create a corridor of light as guests walked from the palace to the garden's far end. You became infrastructure. The sun sets. Guests arrive, senators, wealthy merchants, foreign dignitaries, poets, actors. The social architecture of imperial Rome, gathered for an evening of entertainment in the emperor's private estate. The first torch is lit. You hear it before you see it. A soft roar as the pitch catches. A scream. Brief, then choked off as smoke replaces air in the lungs. The flame is bright. Brighter than torchlight should be because it is not wood burning. It is fat, muscle, skin rendered into fuel. The crowd does not recoil. They continue walking. Some glance at the light, some do not. This is the most disturbing detail of all, the normalization. Within minutes, you're not a person being burned alive. your ambient lighting, your decor. The second torch is lit, then the third. The sequence continues down the pathway. You watch the flames approach, knowing your turn is coming and knowing there is no escape. The post will not break. The pitch will not crack. Your body will not fail quickly enough. When they reach you, there is no ceremony. A torch is touched to your legs, the pitch ignites, and for the next 8 to 12 minutes, you, too, are conscious. I will not describe what burning alive feels like in detail because that would be spectacle. But I will tell you this: the human body does not burn cleanly. It burns in stages. Skin first, then fat, then muscle. Nerves fire until they are destroyed. The brain remains aware far longer than you would hope. And through it all, you remain upright, because the post was designed for that. Who were these people walking through Nero's gardens that night? Were they monsters? Were they complicit in a way that makes them equal to Nero himself? The answer is more complicated and more damning than simple condemnation allows. Most of them did not make a decision to attend an execution. They received an invitation to a garden party hosted by the emperor. Declining would have been politically dangerous. Attending was the expected performance of loyalty. Once there, they faced a choice: acknowledge what was happening and risk being seen as sympathetic to enemies of Rome, or treat the burning Christians as background, unfortunate perhaps, but justified by their crimes. Most chose the latter, not because they were inhuman, but because the alternative was costly. This is how systemic cruelty functions. It distributes responsibility so widely that no single individual feels accountable. The emperor orders, the guards arrest, the executioners prepare, the crowd attends. Each step is separated enough from the next that everyone can claim they were only doing their part. And in the aggregate, a human being is transformed into a torch. The games continued for several days. Dozens, possibly hundreds of Christians were killed in various forms of spectacle, torn by dogs in animal skins, crucified, burned as torches. The exact number is unknown because Christians were not considered important enough to count individually. But something unexpected happened. Even in Rome, even among those who despised Christians, the spectacle began to generate sympathy. Not for Christianity, sympathy for the Christians themselves. Tacitus, who called Christianity a mischievous superstition, wrote, "Hence, even for criminals who deserved extreme and exemplary punishment, there arose a feeling of compassion, for it was not, as it seemed, for the public good, but to glut one man's cruelty that they were being destroyed." Nero had overplayed his hand. The very excess designed to impress had instead revealed the mechanism. The audience saw not justice, but artistry. And artistry in the destruction of human beings, even despised ones, crossed a line that Roman sensibility, brutal as it was, still recognized. This did not save Christians. Persecution would continue in waves for another 2.5 centuries, but it created a fissure in the narrative, a crack in the edifice of imperial justification. The torches in Nero's garden became, unintentionally, evidence not of Christian guilt, but of imperial cruelty. Here is what we do not have: the names of those who burned, their testimonies, their final words, any record written by Christians themselves about what they saw, heard, or endured that night. What we have instead are Roman accounts written by men who viewed Christianity as a disease and Nero as an embarrassment. The story survived not because anyone cared about the victims, but because the victimizers had become inconvenient. This is how history works. The powerful write it, the powerless disappear into it. Every detail I have shared with you tonight comes from the victors. The architecture of the event, the mechanics of the execution, even the emotional response of the crowd, all filtered through the perspective of those who would, at best, consider your suffering a regrettable necessity. Your voice is gone. Not by accident, by design. You're still in the garden. The flames have reached your chest now, your lungs have failed. But before consciousness leaves, you see something that will not be recorded in any history. The face of a child standing at the edge of the crowd, staring directly at you. Not with horror, not with pity, with curiosity. The child is learning something tonight, not about Christians, about power, about what happens when you refuse it, about the cost of being inconvenient. Nero will die 4 years from now, forced to commit suicide as his empire collapses around him. Christianity will survive him, outlast him, eventually become the official religion of the empire that tried to burn it out of existence. But the mechanism he demonstrated, the transformation of human suffering into state spectacle, the aestheticization of cruelty, the distribution of guilt across so many hands that no single person feels responsible, that mechanism did not die with him. It adapted. It refined itself. And if you look carefully at the world we have built in the 2,000 years since that garden party, you will see it still burning, still lighting our pathways, still necessary, we tell ourselves, for the public good. The flame has gone out now. Your body remains on the post, a charred monument to someone's vision of order. The guests have moved on to the next section of the garden where tables are set with wine and roasted meats. The evening continues, and your name, which no one recorded, will never be spoken again.